This is Orlando Sentinel Now.
Hello and welcome. It's Monday, June 21st, and this is Orlando Sentinel Now. Today we're talking about vaccinations. We're also talking about SeaWorld preparing for Hallow and how some Floridians are turning invasive species into breakfast and other meals, I assume. I'm your host, Joe Mario Pedersen, and joining me today, I have Orlando government reporter Ryan Gillespie, tourism reporter Gabrielle Russin, and food columnist Amy Drew Thompson. Thank you all so much for being here today. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. Ryan, for our first story, I want to come over to you now. In your latest headline, Florida probably won't hit Joe Biden's 70% vaccination goal by July 4th. Now, we've talked a lot about on the show about how President Joe Biden has been aiming for this goal. And it seems as though much of the nation will probably make that. Florida not among those states. Can you tell us more about it?
It looks like the country's going to get there as like a total population. But if you look at it state by state, it's sort of a mixed bag, as you'd probably expect, with Florida being below that threshold in all likelihood come the 4th of July. The president a couple of months ago in a speech made this as a goal of like, hey, on the 4th of July, let's return to normal as a country. Let's get together. Let's all be immune to this virus and do this as safely as possible. And at some level, a lot of states have jumped on board with that. 14 so far have reached 70% of adults with at least one dose. There's like 6 or 8 more that in all likelihood will get there in the next couple of weeks. They're right there on the border, maybe 2-3% shy. But right now in Florida, we're not pacing in that direction. We're just over half right now. Granted, in Central Florida, we're higher than that. We're in basically all of our counties here. Orange, Osceola, Seminole, and Lake are between 56 and 64%. So we're pacing above the state, but in all likelihood won't get to 70% locally here.
So, talk to me more about what we're seeing in Central Florida as far as that percentage goes.
Yeah, like I said, we're pacing above the state, which is good. But there's some caveats to that in that we don't know precisely how many people have a vaccine. The good news is it's more than we know, because the federal government, whether it's through the Department of Defense or through Veterans Affairs hospitals, they vaccinated a lot of people. For whatever reason, the state does not have how many. So Dr. Raul Pino, who's the top health official here in Orange County, told us last week that the states told him it could be as high as 8% higher than we know, which is quite the jump, which would actually put Orange County right there around 70%, but we have no idea of knowing if it's 4% higher, 8% higher, or whatever. But in Osceola County's got the highest vaccination rate so far, 64% of adults with at least one dose. Lake County also has 64%, 63% in Orange, and 56% in Lake County. Something that is kind of interesting when in the context of what I just said is CNN had a story last week that if you look at it by state, vaccination rates tend to fall on partisan lines. So states that voted for Joe Biden, by and large, have higher vaccination rates than states who did not. While Florida went for Donald Trump last year, these counties that we're talking about, Orange County, Osceola, those are 2 of the bluest counties in all of Florida. Seminole County went blue. I mean, it's basically the same. I mean, it was like 51-49 or something like that by percentage, but still good vaccination rates. But our reddest county in our coverage area is Lake County, also has our lowest vaccination rate of 56%.
Gotcha. We're going to have to keep on moving from here, but there are a lot more details in this story. And if you all are interested, please go take a look at Ryan's work at orlandosentinel.com. Ryan, thank you so much. All right, Gab, I want to come over to you now for our second story here. SeaWorld Hallow auditions provide an opportunity as live entertainment returns to theme parks. One of your latest headlines. Can you tell us more about the energy and the interest going on at this big event?
So SeaWorld just announced they're having their first ever scary Halloween event. Universal has Halloween Horror Nights. Disney has Boo Bash or Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween. This is the first time that SeaWorld's having kind of an adult and teenage themed Halloween scary late night event. So they're hiring a lot of people. They want to hire more than 600 employees to help put on this inaugural event. And auditions started last week. I think there are going to be a lot more auditions, but it's kind of the first step in the process. And I sat in on one round. There was about a dozen people singing and dancing. They want to be performers in the live entertainment show.
So as far as the hiring process goes, how many people is SeaWorld planning on hiring?
More than 600, and they need people to build sets, to do costumes, to perform. Of course, you got to have the scare actors and the haunted houses and the scare zones. That's a lot of people. They have special events for Christmas and whatnot throughout the year before, but this is one of the biggest hiring for a single event they've ever had. And it's an interesting time to be hiring, more than 600 people, because we've heard it's been hard for some businesses, including SeaWorld, to hire people. So it's not an easy
Right.
thing.
Yeah, and I did want to ask you about that as far as like their confidence level as that goes, because at last year, we saw SeaWorld terminate a lot of different positions, let a lot of people go, furlough a lot of people. So, what is that confidence level like?
I spoke to a SeaWorld executive who handles entertainment, and she was very confident. She said they're looking to hire a certain kind of people that are just nuts about Halloween, and hoping to find those folks. And she said they also offer competitive wages. Their wages start at $15 an hour for performers, which is what you could earn at Universal or eventually Disney on an hourly rate, starting rate. So it is competitive to what some of the other theme parks are doing right now.
Gabby, you spoke to some of the people that were heading in there for auditions, and I wanted to ask you as far as what kind of indication you were getting from these people as far as a return to live entertainment. We've been without it for so long, and it feels almost strange to see it returning. So, what exactly were they saying about, getting out there for auditions? Were they feeling nervous? Was it like riding a bike again, or what was going on?
I talked to one woman and I saw her come out of her audition and her hand was shaking and she was like holding it up like this. She's a seasoned performer, really talented. And she says she does, normally before the pandemic would do auditions, 3 or 4 times a week. Auditioning was like her job. She's used to it. And she hadn't done a live audition in 15 months. And this was her first one back. So she felt those nerves. She had to dig out her resume and her headshots. They were in her closet. She had to find them. And, she felt those kind of butterflies of coming back. It's still not quite the same. There was about 12 or 13 people doing the dance auditions. And I saw they were all learning the choreography together. And everybody, but I think one person was wearing a mask. So it's still not quite the same, but it's a big step coming back.
Absolutely. But very exciting to see a return to normalcy there. If you're all interested in finding out more, take a look at Gabby's story online at orlandosentinel.com. Gabby, thank you so much. All right, last but not least, coming up to Amy Drew now. We're talking to you about, of course, we're always talking about food when we're talking to Amy Drew. Today, we're talking about food from a source that isn't perhaps the most typical. And you spoke to some Floridians who decided to make mincemeat, so to speak, out of different invasive species. Now, you covered a few different ones that I want to talk about here today. And the first that I want to go over with you is those who would hunt boar and hogs and turn them into meals. What'd you find?
The state makes it really easy for you to hunt boar and hog, which has been invasive here for hundreds of years. They cause millions of dollars in damage, but we don't have any place where you can commercially acquire wild boar. If you want to eat Floridian wild boar, you either have to go out and kill it yourself or have a friend who hunts. From what I understand, though, and I have had it, but I haven't had it from a friend here, it's more like red meat. It doesn't taste very much like the pork that you get in the supermarket.
Okay. So when I think of invasive species, the first one that I think of is Burmese pythons out in the Everglades. And I know that you covered this as well. So what were you able to find as far as those who hunt them, which I know that there are quite a few who hunt python, but eat python. Now that was something that was new to me.
Well, this is not commercially available at all. In fact, that they are still doing tests to determine if it will ever be able to be commercially available because a lot of the pythons test high in mercury. However, there are some people who go out and hunt them and choose to give it a shot. One python elimination specialist, Donna Khalil, she has eaten several pythons. She doesn't eat it that often. She has a home mercury testing kit. She has found that the smaller snakes, usually about 7.5 feet, are within normal range. And her reasoning is, tuna tests high for mercury. A lot of times doctors recommend that, say, pregnant women not eat things that have been known to have mercury in them. So she just figures, hey, I can have python instead of tuna. If I have it once a month, what's the big deal? So she's tried it, and she's made it in her pressure cooker. She has used the eggs to bake cookies, and she's eaten the eggs hard boiled. So there's a lot that you can probably do with it.
So, if I'm being completely honest with you, all of that actually sounded pretty good. The thing that made my skin crawl was hearing the fact that the small snake was 7.5 feet.
That is the small snake. These
That's
pythons are
intense.
monsters. When they get over, some of them grow over 20 feet. They really are like monsters. They're huge.
I'm having a really hard time with this segment. I just like keep your python eggs out of my cookies and things.
It's
Look,
creeping
I
me out.
wasn't
It's creeping me out.
But
Oh,
now, see,
Good.
just you saying that makes me want to bake you python egg cookies, even though I have no python eggs.
So for Ryan's sake here, we'll change the topic slightly, keeping it on invasive species, but something that sounds perhaps more palatable, lionfish.
Yeah, lionfish is actually an invasive species that you can get commercially. It's getting rarer. And I think that in part that's due to the success that folks have had with lionfish derbies and getting them off the reefs where they kill everything. They're voracious. They don't have a lot of natural predators here. We're starting to see some evidence that larger fish like grouper and shark are kind of getting the hang of killing lionfish, but they've just been running rampant and, wreaking havoc ecologically on the reefs. The problem with lionfish, though, is that they also can live at depth. And getting them off the reefs that are deeper in the ocean is much more difficult. So they're inventing traps and things to get them that way, because you can't really catch them with nets or hooks and lines. You've got to, these are fish that when they go out for the derbies, they're spear fishing for them.
You mentioned before the show that you've had lionfish before too, right?
Yes, I had lionfish at Sado. This was several years ago. They do not have it on the menu. Do not go there right now. But there are a lot of restaurants that do carry it. Grills occasionally carries it. They say follow them on Facebook and you can see when they have it in. But you can get it in certain fish markets. Lombardi's had a small amount of it in a couple of weeks ago, I think. And there's a fish market out in Port Orange, Kings, where they get it pretty much every week from local divers. So that's a place where you can get it. Lionfish is delicious. It is buttery, flaky. You would treat it very much like the way you would treat grouper or snapper. And if you like either of those fish, you would love lionfish. It's really delicious.
Well, there you go. If y'all are interested in finding out more, take a look at Amy Drew's story at orlandosentinel.com, where, of course, you can find all the other stories that we talked about here today as well. And for those of you who are subscribers to the Orlando Sentinel, thank you so much for continuing to support our work and supporting local journalism. If you want to become a subscriber, it's easy to do so. All you need to do is visit orlandosentinel.com/subscribe. But as for OSN, and I do want to take a second here to talk about OSN, because it has been about a full year since this show has made a transition into the format that you see today, very Teams or Zoom call oriented format that you might be familiar with, as so many of us have had to make that transition over the last year. And as we made that transition, wasn't very clear on whether or not we'd be even able to do this show, but we have been able to do that, and that's thanks in large part to someone that you guys don't get to see, and that's our producer, Wesley Alden. A big thank you to Wesley Alden for making this show possible, and a big thank you to viewers who have been keeping in touch and watching. Thank you to you guys as well. As for OSN, as I said, that is our show here for today. Thank you to everybody, and thank you to Ryan, Amy, Drew, and Gabby, of course, for keeping us informed on what's going on in our community. We'll be back again with more news tomorrow at noon. We'll see you then. Stay healthy and stay safe.
Watch Orlando Sentinel Now live every weekday at noon on our Facebook page and on orlandosentinel.com.